Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here. Now we're going to look at something that until, believe it or not, fairly recently, as far as history goes, that the majority of people believed. And there's still quite a sizable number of people that believe that, this particular thing. And that's, was the earth really created October 23rd, 4004 BC? I think the famous statement is 9 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, or midnight in the Garden of Eden. That's where that term comes from. Now, this happens to be an English translation. I've done a review on this quite some time ago of Ussher's work, James Ussher. Those of you that know theology, you know by the time he was 19 years of age, he had already defeated the top Jesuit in Ireland in a debate. And so he has an intellect that was not to be really trifled with. It was amazing intellect. Let me show you some things in the back before we get into really the October 23rd, 4004 BC. And let's see here. This is the index. He's got a list from all of the places that he used, that he drew from, and it's from the Loeb Classical Library. Of course, the Loeb Classical Library did not exist, here it is, in the time of Ussher, but this is the Loeb Classical Library. While Sister Francesca's zooming in on that, I'm going to hang up my phone. I had it hung up, and then I unhung it up. So you can see that as far as history goes, look at all of the amazing references that he used. Just hundreds upon hundreds. Basically every ancient historian that was available, he used them. And so this is just an incredible resource. This in and of itself, I've done a review on the Loeb Classical Library as well, and maybe a couple ones of those, but this is just fantastic. So when you're looking at, okay, October 23rd, 4004 BC, some people say, well, there's actually missing genealogies, that some of the genealogies in Luke don't match up with the genealogies in Genesis. Now, Genesis chapter 5. Now, the comeback to that is, as far as keeping a Usserian chronology, is that it still says about the ages. They lived to be, 900 years, begat sons and daughters, and then this happened. So even if there's a personage missing, the chronology would remain basically the same. Now, people might say, well, Pastor Waldron, what do you believe? I believe that October 23rd, 4004 BC is probably fairly close. I wouldn't stake my life on that date per se. I don't believe in the gap theory between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. That was basically a capitulation by Pemberton and others in the 1870s with the onslaught of the evolutionary movement to try to fit the Bible into an evolutionary framework. And it's really been carried on today primarily through Finus Dake in his study Bible, but there's a few others. And this would be old earth creationism or the gap theory. And they would say there was a pre-Adamite civilization. There's a lot of problems with that death entered by Adam. So then you've got billions of years or hundreds of millions of years of death before Adam. A lot of problems with that. And then there's so many evidences and proofs that the earth is really young. It's only, 2.5 million days old, or 135 generations or so old, instead of billions upon billions of years of age. And a lot of things like the sun's slow shrinkage, lunar recession, topsoil depletion, topsoil being put into the oceans, just so many factors would mitigate the fact that the universe could be billions upon billions of years of age. We should be seeing new stars pop out into the night sky every night as the starlight gradually reaches Earth after, hundreds of millions of years, just in huge problems with the Big Bang as well. So in creation, male and female of each type with their particular specified specificity of systems within each, like an endocrine system, nervous system, circulatory system, all this being evolutionized at the same time, and then males and females of each type with the capabilities of procreation at the same time. I mean, it's just impossible. And so I would say that it has some dramatic implications, young Earth creationism does as well. But you have to know that basically all the early scientists, where we get all of our the bases for our current knowledge explosion, comes from scientists, men of God, men of science that believe this way. Isaac Newton wrote more about science, and he wrote about biblical chronology, and he came to very close conclusions, similar conclusions based on eclipses, solar and lunar eclipses, as did Ussher. And so most of your major scientists in the Western world believed this until fairly recently. And for evolution to be true, the reason they just started saying long ages is because they began to see that the evidence wasn't there for evolution. And so they just began basically throwing mud against the wall saying, time plus chance equals everything. Given enough time, anything can happen. Disorder can become order. One cells can skip 2, 3, 4, 5 cells and become six-celled organisms. Just, given enough time, anything can happen. There's no transitional species alive today that's observable. But given enough time, anything can happen. And so, was the Earth really created October 23rd, 4004 BC? Don't know. I think one day we'll know. But right this second, I would say that's a fairly good estimate. And many, believe it or not, I've got a list somewhere of some rather preeminent scientists that say, yeah, that's basically a working hypothesis if we didn't have this other theory. So God bless. Talk with you later in Jesus' name.